Okay, hello everyone. Hope you're doing great and following our lectures. I wanted to remind you first of your Pearson account so you can access into Pearson and self-practice using the questions built in this platform. It would be very beneficial for you to practice on parts we have covered in these slides. Plus, you can always send me emails of your questions. So in this lecture, we will continue our discussion for chapter 9. We will cover the two parts in red, the LM curve, asset market equilibrium, and general equilibrium in the complete ISLM model. As you saw in the last lecture, we have already covered the equilibrium in the labor market, which we represented graphically by the FE line, and the IS curve for equilibrium in the goods market. So the remaining market, third market, is the asset market, and we will see how to derive the LM curve that represents asset market equilibrium, and then we will combine all the three markets together in a general framework, general equilibrium framework for the three markets together. We will leave the last part of price adjustment and the attainment of general equilibrium along with a numerical example on the ISLM for the next lecture. So now the LM curve, and this is the third market, the asset market, equilibrium. Before we derive the curve, we will first generate a relation that's basic, but you need to know before we proceed in our analysis of the LM curve. This is the relation between the interest rate and the price of a non-monetary asset such as a bond. The relation is actually inverse. So the price of a non-monetary asset is inversely related to its interest rate or yield. We are sometimes calling the interest rate of the bond as yield or return on the bond. So the relation is inverse. For example, a bond pays $10,000 in 1 year. Its current price is $9,615. And its interest rate is 4%. Why is it 4%? Because when you calculate it, it's 10,000 minus the price that you are paying. 10,000. This is the price that you will get when the bond matures. This is a discount bond that you buy. If you know this from your money banking course, you're buying it at a lower price than the price you get at maturity of the bond. So when the bond matures after the year, you will be paid 10,000 while you originally purchased it at 9,615. So to calculate the return on this bond or the interest rate on the bond, it's 10,000, the price you got at maturity minus the price of purchasing the bond over the purchase price, which is 9,615. You calculate it to get 4%. While if the price of the bond in the market were to fall to 9,524, this is if the price is now lowered, so you are buying it at a lower price of 9,524, the yield or the interest would rise to 5%, because now when you calculate it, the new price is 9,524, so I am paying less for the bond, so you're getting higher return or higher interest rate of 5%. So what did you see in this example? When the price was reduced, the interest rate increased. So the relation is inverse. For a given level of expected inflation, the price of a non-monetary asset is inversely related to the real interest rate. Here is the non-monetary asset. Will always refer to bonds as the main or the famous example for non-monetary assets. When the price of this bond declines, the interest rate on it will increase. So let's now see in this slide how we can get to the asset market equilibrium, and recall what we have said before in chapter 7. The equilibrium in asset market happens when the real money supply equals the real money demand, nominal or real, but we are always dealing with the real terms. So the real money supply equals the real quantity of money demanded to achieve equilibrium in the asset market. So the real money supply is determined by the central bank and isn't affected by the real interest rate. This is what we saw last time. or the previous the lecture on chapter 7, the money supply is fixed at the amount determined by the central banks. That's why we always draw it as a vertical line. It's not affected by the real interest rate, while we draw the real money demand as a downward sloping curve because it's decreasing as the real interest rate rises. Remember, the real interest rate, this is the real interest rate on which assets? On the non-monetary assets such as bonds. So when the real interest rate on bonds increase, people will demand more bonds and less money. So that's why the demand for money will be declining as the real interest rate on non-monetary assets increases. This is also we saw last time or the lecture on chapter 7, and draw it as a downward sloping curve. Real money demand rises as the level of output rises. This is also one of the factors that cause the shift of the money demand when the level of output or income increases. We said that how will this affect the money demand? It will increase, but less. We said that this increase is less than proportional, but it increases. So when output increase, the real money demand will increase, so the curve will shift. The LM curve, this is the curve we are interested in, is derived by plotting real money demand for different levels of output and looking at the resulting equilibrium, as we will show shortly in the next figure, 9.4. So the LM curve represents equilibrium in the assets market. And again, why it's called an LM? We said before that IS is referring to the investment and saving. Here LM, remember the L function, this is the real money demand function, and M, this is the real money supply. It's actually M over P, but for short M. So the LM curve is an abbreviation for real money supply and real money demand. So to get this curve for the LM curve, we have to plot a relation between output and the real interest rate that clears the asset market, as we will see. So to derive the LM curve, we are actually plotting the real money supply and the real money demand against the real interest rate. This is panel A. So again, the real money supply, this is constant. So here it's 1000 because it's determined by the central bank. And the money demand, real money demand, is a downward sloping curve because the real money demand decreases as the real interest rate increases. And here the real interest rate on the vertical axis, this is the real interest rate on non-monetary assets such as bonds. So when it increases, the real money demand decreases. MD bracket Y equals 4000. This means this is the real money demand associated with output of 4000. The equilibrium was initially at point A. This is the point at which real money demand equals real money supply. Now that we have a higher Y of 5000, the implication of this is to shift the real money demand curve so that the equilibrium is now at point C. So when Y increased from 4000 to 5000, the real money demand curve shifts because Y increased, so people will do more transactions, as we said, so this increases real money demand. So now the point of equilibrium in the asset market is point C. How to translate this to get the LM curve, which represents again the relation between the real interest rate and output? So always for the FE line, for the IS curve or the LM curve, we are always plotting a relation between the real interest rate and output derived to have an equilibrium in the corresponding market. So for the LM curve, I'm getting this relation at which the asset market is in equilibrium. So that's why I'm drawing here the real money supply and real money demand. At point A on the figure B, point A is corresponding to point A in figure A. So point A is output of 4,000, and this is associated with interest rate of 3%. This is the interest rate that clears the asset market when output is 4,000. When output increased to 5,000, we got another equilibrium point, which is point C in both panels. So point C is corresponding to output 5,000, and the interest rate has now increased from 3% to 5%. So what did you conclude about the shape of the LM curve? It's upward sloping. So it's the opposite of the IS curve. We saw last lecture the IS curve sloping downward. Here the LM curve is sloping upwards because as you increase output, now you have a higher real interest rate, which increased from 3% to 5%. We got this from the intersection between money supply and money demand, which shifted from point A to point C when output increased, which means that interest rate increased from 3 to 5% when Y increased from $4,000 to $5,000. In the last slide, we drove the LM curve graphically, but we now need to know the mechanism through which this happens. Why is the LM curve sloping upwards? So starting at equilibrium point A, suppose that output rises. As we said, that output increased from 4,000 to 5,000. So what happens to real money demand? It increases. The rise in people's demand for money makes them sell non-monetary assets, because people's portfolio are formed of money and non-monetary assets. So now they are demanding more money. So how to get this money? While supply of money is fixed, they have to sell some of their non-monetary assets that are present in their portfolios to have more money, because now they have higher income, so they need to conduct more transactions. They need money, so they will sell some of their non-monetary assets, such as their holdings of some bonds, so they will sell these bonds. So what happens when when many people supply or sell too much of a good? The price of this good, which is here the assets, the non-monetary assets, will fall because there is plenty of supply in the market. People are selling them, so the price will decline. And remember the relation we said about the interest rate and the price. When the price decreases, the real interest rate will rise. So now the interest rate on the bonds will increase. So what happens when the interest rate on bonds increase? The demand for money declines until equilibrium is reached again. So if we begin with a situation of A, where there is an asset market equilibrium, but see the figure, we got point B at which the real money demand is now higher than the real money supply. So at point B, we have demand of 1,200 while supply is 1,000. How to restore back equilibrium? How to reach point C? This has to happen through an increase in the real interest rate from 3% to 5%. And how does this happen? The mechanism, we said it here, just said that this happens because people now will sell non-monetary assets to increase their demand for money. They need more money, so they will sell non-monetary assets to get money. When they sell non-monetary assets, the price of non-monetary assets will decline, so the real interest rate will increase. And as you move along the curve from B to C, the interest rate increase and the demand is downward sloping. So when the interest rate increase, this will make again the non-monetary assets more attractive, so this will decrease the demand for money until it becomes equal again to the real money supply at $1,000. So we restored the equilibrium at point C again through this mechanism. And what's important here is to get the conclusion for the LM curve, that it's an upward sloping curve when the when the output increases, the interest rate that clears the asset market increases. So to recap, the LM curve shows the combinations of the real interest rate and output that clear the asset market, that achieves equilibrium in the asset market, where the real money demand is exactly equal to the real money supply. Intuitively, for any given level of output, the LM curve shows the real interest rate necessary to equate real money demand and real money supply. And thus the LM curve, as we saw in the graphs, slopes upward. In the previous slides, what was the variable that we were changing? We were changing output or y. That's why we draw the LM curve. We were moving along this curve to get the points on the curve itself. Here, for the factors that shift the LM curve, we will keep output constant, and we will discuss other factors that shift the curve itself. So we are not moving along the curve, we are shifting the curve. So any change that reduces real money supply relative to real money demand shifts the LM curve up and to the left. And remember that the LM curve is sloping upward. So in your imagination, the LM curve is sloping upward. So when we say it's shifting up and to the left, you have to imagine this shift, how it looks like. The LM curve, remember that the LM curve is the opposite of the IS curve. The IS curve was sloping downwards. Here, the LM curve is sloping upwards. So the shift here will be up and to the left when there is a change that reduces real money supply relative to real money demand, as we will see shortly in the graphs. For a given level of output, the reduction in real money supply relative to real money demand causes the equilibrium real interest rate to rise. This happens as we decrease the real money supply relative to real money demand. Again, imagine the graphs for the real money supply and the real money demand. The real money supply is the vertical line, the real money demand is the downward sloping line, and when the real money supply is reduced, you will shift it to the left. So now you will get a higher equilibrium real interest rate. The rise in the real interest rate is shown as an upward shift of the LM curve. Why it's a shift? Because we are maintaining output constant. There is something else that changed other than Y. So we are talking about a shift and not a movement. Similarly, a change that increases real money supply relative to real money demand shifts the LM curve down and to the right. So in the factors that shift the LM curve, we will talk about changes in the real money supply, and then we will talk about changes in the real money demand, because these are the two graphs we are using to get the LM curve. So any change in real money supply or in real money demand will shift the LM curve. So let's begin with changes in the real money supply. As we said in the previous slide, an increase in the real money supply shifts the LM curve down and to the right. And we'll see this in figure 9.5 just now. So this is the figure 9.5 that shows the increase in the real money supply. When real money supply increases, you get a new vertical line that is shifted to the right, because we are now having a higher real money supply that increased in this example from 1000 to 1200. So this is the shift in the MS curve, which is the real money supply curve. So what happens to the equilibrium point? The equilibrium of the asset market has changed from point A, at which the interest rate was 3%, to point D, at which the interest rate is 2%. So how to represent this on the LM curve? We have the LM curve. The first one is the black one. This is the point A, at which the interest rate was 3%. And remember, output is constant here. We are not changing output. So output is 4,000, which is the output associated with the drawn money demand curve. We have not changed it. We are just changing the real money supply. It's increasing now, so we are having a new equilibrium point D. To represent this on the LM curve, you will have the same output 4,000 and a lower real interest rate. So point D on the new LM curve, the red one, is associated with now a lower real interest rate, 2%. This means that what happened to the LM curve? The shift is down and to the right. So this is the shift when the LM, the new LM is associated with a lower real interest rate due to the increase in the real money supply from MS1 1000 to MS2 1200. If now the reverse was a drop in real money supply happened instead of an increase, how shall we draw the LM curve? You can draw it by yourselves and make sure you can draw this. This is the opposite of what we said. Here the money supply decreased instead of increasing. So how to shift the LM curve? When you draw this, you will find that the LM curve will shift up and to the left. The real money supply M over P changes when does the real money supply change? When either M, which is the nominal money supply, changes or P changes. So the real money supply will increase if M increases, and will increase also if P decreases. Sometimes in some problems or in some instances both happens, that M changes and P changes. So we have to decide to know which of these have higher magnitude, M or P, to decide on the final effect on the real money supply. For example, if M was more than double, then P only doubled. What happened to the real money supply? It will increase because here the effect of M is higher. So we have to when both M and P changes, we have to know which effect is greater by how much M and P changes to decide on the final effect on the real money supply. And this is the second factor that can change the real money demand. We have just covered the real money supply. Now we are talking about changes in real money demand that can lead to shifts in the LM curve. So specifically, an increase in real money demand shifts the LM curve up and to the left, as you will see shortly in figure 9.6. And the opposite, if there happens a drop in real money demand, this will shift the LM curve down and to the right. So in this figure 9.6, we have an increase in the real money demand. So MD has shifted in the figure panel A. MD1 now shifted to MD2 because the real money demand increases. So what happens to the equilibrium point? The point of equilibrium for the asset market, it changes from point A to point G. So what happens to the interest rate? This is the main information I wanted to get from the panel A. What happens to the interest rate? It increases from 3% to 6%. So now when I shift the LM curve, how will I shift it? I have a constant Y for 1000, but now the interest rate increased from 3% to 6%. So I will draw a point G on the new LM curve, the red one, which is at a higher real interest rate but at the same level of output of 4000. So what happened to the LM curve? It shifted up and to the left. Now, as you may now know from our previous chapters, there is always a summary table for the factors that shift the LM curve. The LM curve will shift down and to the right because of an increase. This is the list of all factors that can shift the LM curve down and to the right. And again, you can get the opposite shifts if what happens to the 8 factors is reversed. Here the LM curve will shift down and to the right because of an increase in the nominal money supply, because here M increased, so the real money supply increases, so this will shift the LM curve down and to the right. Refer back to our previous graphs. A decrease in the price level. Why is this? Because the price level affects the real money supply. So when we say the price level decrease, this means the real money supply increase. So you get the same effect of an increase in the nominal money supply, because both the first and the second factors are leading to an increase in the real money supply. What about the rest of the factors? These are 6 factors that affect which variable? The increase in expected inflation, a decrease in the nominal interest rate of money, a decrease in wealth, a decrease in risk of alternative assets, and an increase in the liquidity of alternative assets, and increase in the efficiency of payment technologies. You remember these factors? We said them before in chapter 7. These are the factors that affect the real money demand. Here, this is an increase in expected inflation. All of these factors will lead to what? A decrease in the real money demand. So any of these will decrease the real money demand. The LM curve again shifts up and to the left, the opposite. If what happens is the opposite of what we are saying. For example, if a decrease in the nominal money supply, if there's an increase in the price level, if there is a decrease in expected inflation, etc. So you get the opposite if you the opposite shift, I mean shifting up and to the left, if what happens is the opposite of these listed factors. And you can find the summary again in the next table. So this is the summary table that you have to make sure you understand it correctly and understand it very well. Here is an increase in any of these factors, and what will happen to the LM curve? It will shift down and to the right or up and to the left, and the reason for this shift. What I'm stressing here in this slide is what happens when the price level increases, because we will need this in our next section. So when the price level increases, the real money supply falls, because the real money supply is M over P. So when P increases, the real money supply, remember B is in the denominator, so when it increases, the real money supply falls, and this will raise the real interest rate that clears the asset market. That's why the LM curve will shift up and to the left. So when there is an increase in P, the LM curve shifts up and to the left. So remember this, because we will need it frequently. Again, the rest of the factors, you can simply read them because they are obvious. I hope they are obvious. So now we come to the next this section about the general equilibrium in the complete ISLM model. So when do we say we have a general equilibrium? When all markets are simultaneously in equilibrium. What are the markets we're talking about? The three markets: the labor market, the goods market, and the asset market. When these three markets are at the same time simultaneously in equilibrium, we say that the economy is in a general equilibrium state. So this occurs graphically when the FE, IS, and LM curves intersect. So the point of intersection of the three lines, the FE line, the IS curve, and LM curve, this is the point of general equilibrium, because FE represents equilibrium in the labor market, IS represents equilibrium in the goods market, LM in the asset market. So when the three curves are intersecting at one point, this means that the three markets are in equilibrium. That means we have a general equilibrium. And how is general equilibrium reached? We will see this in detail, or more or clearer in the next section, or in this section and the next section. But remember these two notes about the general equilibrium. They are very important. So the general equilibrium of the economy always occurs at the intersection of the IS curve and FE line. So the point of general equilibrium will always be an intersection of the IS curve and FE line. And second, adjustments of the price level cause the LM curve to shift until it passes through the general equilibrium point defined by the intersection of the IS curve and FE line. So remember this, and it will become clearer afterwards. But to get the general equilibrium, you need first to have an intersection between the IS and FE line. And then the LM curve will shift so as to get to this equilibrium point. And how will the LM shift? It will shift through an adjustment of the price level. That's why in the previous slides I'm highlighting the effect of the price level on the LM curve, because we will need it to reach the general equilibrium. So remember that to get to the general equilibrium, the LM curve has to change, or has to shift, so as to change to reach the general equilibrium point through an adjustment of the price level. And here is the equilibrium in the ISLM model. Of course, when we say ISLM model, we mean we are drawing the ISLM and also the FE line, but for short we are calling it ISLM model, but we are plotting actually the three markets. These three markets, when they become in equilibrium, we have a single point of intersection. This is point E, the point of general equilibrium that achieves equilibrium in the three markets, the labor, goods, and asset market, point E, at which the full employment LM and IS curve intersect. So to better understand general equilibrium, we are going to apply the ISL framework on a certain example of a temporary adverse supply shock. So a temporary adverse supply shock, as you may remember from our beginning lectures, it can happen due to, for example, bad weather or an increase in the price of oil. So the effect of this adverse supply shock, any of which can happen and lead to an adverse supply shock. The effect of this is to decrease the productivity parameter in the production function temporarily, because we are saying that it's a temporary adverse supply shock, so it's not a permanent one. The effect of it is to decrease the A. Remember, the A, the productivity parameter, it decreases due to, for example, a bad weather or an increase in the price of oil. So this supply shock reduces the marginal productivity of labor and hence labor demand. So with lower labor demand, equilibrium real wage and employment MBAR fall. Again, get back to chapter 3, the labor market equilibrium. When we have a lower MBN, what happens to the demand for labor? It decreases, and when the demand for labor decreases, the labor demand, again, this is the downward sloping, and the labor supply is the upward sloping. When labor demand decreases, what happens to the real interest rate, the real wage and the real and the N bar? And the level of employment both decrease. If you draw the graph of labor supply and labor demand and shift the demand curve downwards, because it decreased due to the temporary supply shock, which decreased MBN, we have now lower, at the new equilibrium point, lower wage and lower N bar. So the level of employment decreases. And when we have lower N bar, and we said that this adverse supply shock has lowered productivity, what's the effect of this on Y bar? It also decreases. So Y bar decreases because N bar decreased and because A decreased. So the FE line will shift. How we will shift the FE line? It will be shifted to the left because Y bar decreased. So the effect of the adverse supply shock here, that the FE line will shift to the left due to the decline in Y bar due to the decrease in M bar and A. So now what about the effect of this temporary supply shock in the IS or LM curve? It will have no effect on the IS or the LM curve, because it does not, the temporary supply shock is not affecting a factor that shifts the IS or the LM curve. Remember the summary tables that we said that these are the most important ones. What were the factors that affected the IS, that caused the IS curve to shift? Any factor that changed desired saving or desired investment, such as wealth, expected future income, future marginal product of capital, and so on, taxes. So nothing of none of these factors has changed. So we do not change the IS curve because there is no factor that affects desired saving or desired investment changed. And similarly for the LM curve, when does the LM curve shift? When there is a factor that affects real money supply or real money demand change here, such as the interest rate on non-monetary assets, such as wealth, such as liquidity of alternative assets, such as nominal money supply. Nothing of these factors has changed. So in both figures, they will not change. The IS or LM will not shift. So we get a new FE line, but we have the same IS curve and the LM curve. And as we will see in the next figure, the FE line, the new FE line, the IS curve, and the LM1 curve, the LM curve, the original one, there's no point of intersection between the three, and we need a point of intersection to reach the general equilibrium. So what shall happen to reach this general equilibrium? As we said that to reach general equilibrium, the price level has to adjust. So I always get the general equilibrium, so a shift in the LM curve. And the LM curve will shift when price changes. So the price level has to adjust, shifting the LM curve until a general equilibrium is reached. And this will be also clearer as we see the figure. But for now, you can see, or you can follow from our discussion, that we have a new FE line that's shifted to the left, and IS and LM curves that did not shift, they are the same. And there's no point of intersection between the three curves. So to reach this point of intersection, which is the general equilibrium point, the price level has to change in order to shift the LM curve to get to this point of equilibrium. And in this case, the case of the adverse supply shock, we will see that the price level will increase to shift the LM curve up and to the left to restore the general equilibrium at point F in the figure 9.8 shown next. So as you may see here, the original point of general equilibrium was point E. This was the point where the FE1, this is the full employment level, the original one. If you see 1, this means the original curves. So FE1, LM1, and IS, these are the original graph or original curves. The general equilibrium was at point E, and Y bar was Y bar 1. Now an adverse supply shock happens, such as an increase in the price of oil, for example. What will be the effect of this on the curves? We said that this will lead to a shift of the FE line to the left. So we have from FE1, we have FE2 now. And the IS and the LM curve did not change. There is no shift in either IS or LM. So the adverse supply shock only changes Y bar because it changes M bar and it changes A. So Y bar will decrease due to the decrease in M bar and A. So how to reach the equilibrium? We said the new general equilibrium point, we said it will be an intersection between FE2 and the IS. We said that we will always have the point of equilibrium as an intersection between the new FE line and the original IS curve. But how about the LM curve? There is no point at which FE2, LM1, and IS intersect. So how to get to the equilibrium point? The LM1 has to shift this way, has to shift up and to the left in order to have one equilibrium point intersection at F. This is the intersection point that will give me the new general equilibrium point. So to get to the general equilibrium point, we need to have a shift in the LM curve up and to the left. So how would this happen, that the LM curve will shift up and to the left? Remember, this happens when the price increases, because when price increases, what happens to the money supply? It decreases, so the LM curve will shift up and to the left. So the new equilibrium point, general equilibrium point, will be point F, at which Y bar is now lower at Y bar 2. And what happens to the real interest rate? Compare the real interest rate at point E, the original general equilibrium point, with the real interest rate at general equilibrium point F, the new one. Now the real interest rate is higher. It's actually higher at point F than point E. E is associated with a lower real interest rate. So the interest rate has increased while output has decreased. And we said that this happens because we got the equilibrium point F as an intersection between FE2 and IS when the LM shifts up and to the left due to the increase in the price level. So to summarize the effect of the temporary adverse supply shock on different economic variables, we can now say that the real wage and employment will decline because the demand for labor will decrease due to this temporary adverse supply shock that decreases MBN. So the real wage and employment M bar will decrease, and hence the output will decrease. As we saw in the figure, it decreases from Y bar 1 to Y bar 2, and the FE line shifted to the left. So the output, when you compare point E, the original general equilibrium point, with point F, the new general equilibrium point, the output is now lower at Y bar 2. While the real interest rate, if you also compare the real interest rate in point E and point F, you will see that the real interest rate has increased. And the price level is also higher due to the shift of the LM curve up and to the left. So there is a temporary burst of inflation as the price level moves to a higher level. So as the price level increases, there will be a temporary increase in inflation, because what's inflation? This is the growth rate of the prices. So whenever prices are increasing, the inflation will increase. And after the price level stabilizes at its higher value and is no longer rising, inflation will stop. It will subside. So the inflation rate rises temporarily and not permanently. Since the real interest rate is higher and output is lower, what happens to consumption and investment? They will be lower, because the real interest rate encourages people to save more and consume less. And also because the output is now lower, so they will consume less. Also, investment will be lower due to the higher interest rate. Thank you.